Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Horsham Rural City Council's Budget Information Question Information session tonight. My name is Councillor Mark Radford, the Mayor of Horsham Rural City, and I'll now do the acknowledgement of country. The Horsham Rural City Council acknowledges the 5 traditional owner groups of this land: the Watchabollock, Wagaya, Jopagog, Jardwa and Jarwa Jarli people. We recognise the important and ongoing place that all Indigenous people hold in our community. We pay our respects to the elders, both past and present, and commit to working together in the spirit of mutual understanding and respect for the benefit of the broader community and future generations. With me this evening is our CEO, Mr. Sunil Bala, and also up on the screen today, we've got the Director of Corporate Services, Mr. Graeme Harrison, the Director of Communities in Place, Mr. Kevin O'Brien, and the Director of Infrastructure, Mr. John Martin. We've received some questions in advance of tonight's session, and we'll start with working on the questions that we've received. But there is also an opportunity for, if you'd like to lodge a question while we're going, there is a chat facility, and you're welcome to use that. And the session is geared to run till about 6:30. And if we don't get through all the questions, well, we'll keep the ones that we've missed and will be answered after the session. I suppose the key thing to say at the start of the session is that one of the most important things that the Council produces every year is the annual budget. And work on the budget for the coming financial year started last November. But as you can imagine, once February came along and the coronavirus impact, it's really been almost taken quite a few steps backward and have to relook at the whole thing in response to the COVID-19 emergency. So councils produced their budget, which is now out for public comment, and one of the purposes of tonight is to try to provide some information to help people understand what is proposed in the budget, and also to encourage you to put in a submission. It can be a submission of a concern, maybe something in the budget you don't agree with, or it also may be a submission of saying, well, we agree with what you're doing. And that'll help guide the councillors when it comes to making the final decision about adoption of the budget. But before we get even there is an opportunity for those submissions to make an influence on the budget, as there should be. And some submitters have the opportunity to be heard if they'd like to be. So all that'll happen in the lead up to the adoption. So I suppose the key date at the moment is to keep in mind is that the budget submissions are open until the 7th of July. And so we'd encourage you to take that opportunity and share your thoughts on this year's budget. As every year, there's a lot of initiatives and plans to do things. There's some infrastructure projects that are quite lengthy in the list, and I'll touch on a few of those a little bit later on. So as we go through the night, we'll be able to do 2 things. We'll be answering the questions, but also providing some general information about what is in the draft budget for the Horsham Rural City this year. So I'm now going to commence with the question answer process, if you like, and I'll read the question that we've received, and the question is first name, and then I'll invite the appropriate director to respond. So the first question received is from Fletcher. Why do farmers get the biggest rate rise again? Why have council got it in for the farmers? How can 4.5% increase be justified during a pandemic? Farmers spend money every week in Horsham at local businesses. They are the ones that will help them recover, not council increasing our rates and giving it back to businesses. Please explain how this will work. Graeme. Unmute yourself, Graeme, so we can hear you. That's the way. No. That's it.
Had to happen, didn't it? Why do farms get the biggest rate rise? Essentially because they've had the largest increase in property values. So property values for farms have increased on average by 4.4% compared to a 2.95% increase for residentials. So to put that into context, a 1,000 hectare farm, a sort of average value would have increased last year by $330,000. Whereas a residential property will have increased by about $10,000. So that contributes to the rate rise being more for the farm properties than residential. In terms of, have council got it in for farmers? Well, no, certainly not. It's the prices that are being paid for land out there in the community that's driving up the values, and the values are then in turn impacting on the rates. So it's the tax system at work, and council did provide a further discount or a differential to farmers of 13% last year, which was passed on through the rating system to the other sectors. In relation to spending in the community, and of course any spending in the community benefits the local community, and certainly farmers and council alike contribute to that, especially during times of economic downturn such as been experienced with COVID-19. But what needs to be remembered here is that council rates are just one of many taxes that most of us pay. You know, there's income tax, there's capital gains tax, consumption tax, land tax, stamp duty, and, you know, we all know them. There's a host of many more. They all raise revenue in different ways. They apply to different sources of income and capital value and the like to generate taxes for all levels of government, not just local. I suppose they're varied in nature, so that across the board, each sector of the community pays their fair share. Some sectors get exemptions and concessions in varying ways, but hopefully what one person or one sector avoids or doesn't pay in one area, they perhaps don't in another. That as a whole creates a fair tax system across our nation and ensures that everybody contributes to the society that they live in. It just so happens that the local government has been left with the tax that is a tax on wealth as measured by land values. So we're the ones that have that, that's our component that's legislated, and that's the way that we can raise our rates. So hence, if farm values are increasing significantly more than residential values, so the level of wealth's increasing, and therefore so does the tax contribution.
Okay, all right, thank you, Graeme. We've received the next question from Neville. A 4.8% rate increase for farmers under a 2% rate cap is not on. I'm sure councillors will remember in 2018, under a 2.5% rate cap, council gave farmers a 14% rate rise above residential. This year, council expects farmers to pay a rate increase almost 2% higher than residential. 2018 was never to happen again. In March, Mr Harrison admitted that in 2019, even with a 63% differential, at least 7% of farmers still paid more than in 2019. I would suggest that with this year's revaluation and rate increase, that figure will now be closer to 30%. Thus the need for a further differential increase. Will you give a 60% farm differential? The VFF sent a pre-budget submission to all councils asking for a nil rate increase. Was this presented to our councillors before the draft budget was addressed at the last meeting? Graeme.
So I suppose in relation to the first part of that question, part of the rate review process that was conducted in 2018 was the adoption of a rating policy that basically put in place a trigger so that when farm differentials would be reviewed, or any differential for that matter, and that trigger said that if the difference between the increasing values in one sector compared back to the residential sector was more than 3.5%, then council would instantly look at the differential. So in terms of what I mentioned just before, the farm values rose by 4.4% and the residential rose by 2.95. So the difference between the two there was only a 1.45% more increase for the farm values. So that didn't trigger that policy. In relation to the question around the VFF letter, I'm not sure of the exact situation with respect to the letter. I believe it was sent to the Mayor. But having said that, the budget has been only made available to the community for comment as of the 1st of June, and submissions can be made up to the 7th of July. And the VFF's letter will certainly be considered with all other submissions received. The VFF is one of many groups out in the community, and it's a representative of some farmers, not all farmers, and it doesn't necessarily get treated in a different way, and its position will certainly be considered in the submissions that we receive.
Okay, thank you, Graeme. Move along now. We have a question from Heather. Why are we looking at moving the information centre? I'll add an extra word. It's the Visitor Information Centre. Why are we looking at moving the Visitor Information Centre? You may think the Town Hall is the right place, but it sounds like you are not grey nomads. We travelled to Rockhampton and there were too many caravans in a narrow main street, so we just moved on from that place and spent no money there. The same will happen here. People talk and we'll keep going through town without stopping. Kevin, could you respond to that, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council has decided that the visitor services should be integrated with the Horsham Town Hall and be a major destiny for visitors, and ensure that the connection happens with the Central Activity District. As far as long parking is concerned, we have got additional long parking for grey nomads and the like in close proximity to the Horsham Town Hall, and also we're looking at obviously bringing that online and reviewing that further. So we're ensuring that we're providing for those needs to enable people from outside Horsham to connect with our visitor services, and also our Central Activity District as well, through providing adequate parking.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Okay, the next question is from Kath. I'd like to know how many consultants were employed or contracted by Horsham Rural City Council in the 2019-2020 year, and how much did we pay for their services? Sunil, could you answer that, please?
Thanks, Mark, and thanks for your question, Kat. So we engage a huge range of contractors and consultants to deliver various services where we do not have the internal resources or staff or necessarily the skills to do the work. And that could be, in a range of areas, like, whether it's road design, whether it's engineering advice, legal advice, architecture, building design, environmental services, urban planning, and so on. So it's a long list of things, where we don't have in-house expertise. But it is about finding the right balance, so that we can be most efficient and effective as a council in doing all the things we expected to do. So to answer your question, in terms of how many consultants we engaged during the last 12 months, so we had 39 different consultants at a total cost of over $700,000, $747,000 to be precise. And yeah, so there were sort of, for instance, 14 were in engineering design, there were 8 in environmental and waste area. As you would know, we run a major landfill in the region. Land use planning, we had 6 consultants doing all sorts of projects ranging from the Horsham South Structure Plan to City to River, master planning, the planning scheme amendments. We had the transport planning consultants for 5 projects, and also for land valuations and ITE projects. So all up, as I said earlier, $747,000. But in the overall budget context, which is just under $60 million, so that sort of is a 1.2, 1.3%, so that's the sort of the overall spend on consultants. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Sunil. The next question is from Pamela. Council is spending $1.4 million on the river precinct. Why not put that $1.4 million into an investment fund? Sorry, why not put that $1.4 million into an investment fund until everybody is happy to proceed with the river project? Later on, we can then use the interest gained for the riverfront activation. Kevin, please.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Pamela, for the question. Council received feedback from the community on the City to River master plan, and as a result, adopted the plan late last year with some modifications. It has now secured just over $2 million of funds through federal and state government to advance the first precinct. You'll never get total agreement from the whole community on such a major project. There is, however, significant community support to proceed. That is why Council has adopted the master plan and provided funds for its implementation.
And Kevin, can you just give a little bit of an update? So currently you're working on the River Precinct, and when will you be looking at the other precincts?
Yeah, so the first precinct is the riverfront activation. We're also starting to plan for precinct 2, which is the City Oval Sawyer Park precinct. So we expect that similar design works will be developed with the community over the next sort of the remainder of this calendar year, as far as developing up the plans for that City Oval Sawyer Park precinct.
Yep, and I also understand in the budget there's some money set aside for the feasibility study for the indoor-outdoor precinct.
Yes, and that is to look at whether the indoor / outdoor regional sports facility is located at the showgrounds or alternatively in Horsham West. There is funds allocated in the budget, but it's subject to matching funding from the state government. And if that funding is secured, then we go ahead and carry out a feasibility study to assess where that the need for that facility and where it should be located.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, now the next question is from Anne. Why do we have the dearest rates here? I know people living in other bigger towns and their rates are half the amount of ours. Graeme.
Yeah, this is often a statement we do hear from time to time, and it tends to be when people are comparing particularly Melbourne areas, urban areas with Horsham. And if that comparison is made with the city, where the council's perhaps got 5 to 10 times of our population in which to share the service costs, and where they maintain only around 50 kilometres of roads as compared to our 2,900, then yes, the difference can be quite large. However, Horsham Council is a regional city for the western region of the state, and it provides a wide range of services to residents, not just from our municipality, but also from outside, things like the aquatic centre and the performing arts, and even the large CBD area that we maintain. So when council rates are compared with other regional cities, such as the likes of Geelong, Bendigo, Ballarat, Wangaratta, Wodonga, they're the regional cities around the state. We are slightly higher than the average of those groups, and that's about 3.5%. But those include some pretty big regional cities with a lot of population as well. But when you compare us to the smaller regional cities like the likes of Wangaratta, Wodonga and Warrnambool, then we're pretty much in the middle of that grouping. What I'd encourage is the state government's got a website called Know Your Council. If you Google that, you'll find that what you can do is you can go and actually have a look at a whole range of measures for our council, and you can compare it with up to 3 other councils in our regional cities grouping. And you can have a look and see where we do stack up with those like councils.
Thank you, Graeme. And you mentioned the roads. So for road construction in the current budget, there's plans for $1.8 million worth of urban road expenditure, $3.8 million for rural roads, and also $429,000 for footpaths and cycleways. Probably a question for John, if you wouldn't mind answering. How does council decide which roads they're going to upgrade? And you have to unmute yourself, John.
Of course I am. Sorry. Thanks, Mark. Council uses a couple of techniques for doing that. One is we do regular condition assessments of all of our roads to monitor their condition, and we score them on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1's quite new and condition 5's reaching the end of their useful life. So we do that across the whole municipality, streets in town and rural roads as well, gravel and sealed roads alike. So we have a ranking of those, and basically the roads that are in the poorest condition based on that assessment generally come to the top of the list for reconstruction. But it's also based on maintenance history as well too. We're getting a lot of requests for repairs to parts of the system, or we're getting a lot of our more regular inspections are indicating that we've got a lot of maintenance problems. That also influences which streets or roads get upgraded.
Okay, thank you, John. That's good, thank you. We now have a question from Sonia regarding the COVID-19 budget allocation. We are struggling enough as it is now without the added stress of paying more on our rates. You are only going to make it harder on an already stretched budget. We are all victims of COVID, so shouldn't we be all spared the added stress of paying extra? What happened to all council actually decreasing rates or stopping them altogether? Sunil?
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and thanks for your question, Sonia. COVID-19 has impacted on us all in many different ways, but certainly financially, it has not impacted everyone, nor has it impacted everyone evenly. So council's response is to try and help those who are most in need, and that's what we're doing through this budget process. So there are effectively almost $1.2 million earmarked for new initiatives and programs to help the businesses who have been impacted, and also the community who have been impacted through COVID-19. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Sunil. So it's important to emphasise it's the business and also community groups who will be supported with that fund.
That's right. So the programs are targeted at both, the community groups and also the businesses, and that's in addition to the community grants program we have. So we part of the budget includes close to $400,000 in different community grants. So the $1.2 million I mentioned, that's on top of what we already have done in the previous years.
Okay, thank you. That probably ties in with the next question also from Annette. Regarding the COVID-19 budget allocation, how will residents benefit?
Thanks, Mark, and thanks for your question, Annette. I mentioned earlier, the COVID-19 has obviously impacted us all in different ways. Again, financially, the impact varies. But the benefits to the community are that council is continuing to deliver the 80-odd services, except where we had to suspend some services at the direction of the chief health officer, and clearly there's a cost associated with delivering those services. We have also suspended paid parking, as you may know, and we have deferred the payment of rates. If people have any issues around or difficulty paying their rates, or for that matter, any other amounts due to the council, we have deferred their payment, and we are not charging any interest on those payments. And all these things come at a cost. So clearly, all these things do amount to a benefit to the residents.
Okay, thank you, Sunil. The next question is from Pamela. What happens to that 2% COVID increase the following year? Are the rates reducing back down? Graeme, could you answer that, please? You have to unmute yourself, please. Got it.
Yep. So in terms of the 2%, council only sets a budget for a 12-month period. So what will happen next year will be up to the decision of the council at the time. So I can't tell you what will be the decision.
Okay, thank you. We move on now to a question from Natalie. Natalie asks, please spend some money on roads and footpaths. People in wheelchairs find them very harmful and painful to travel on. John, could you answer that, please, for Natalie?
Well, Mark, you started to answer that question before yourself when you commented on the fact that we've got about $1.8 million planned in the budget for urban road reconstruction, a further $3.8 million on rural roads, also about $0.4 million on footpaths and cycleways. And just in particular, Mark, this current year and next financial year that we're talking about for the budget, there's been an extra allocation for footpaths to address the backlog we've got of trip hazards in the footpaths where, because of Horsham's very mobile soils, we have these raises in the footpath. So we're focusing on catching up with getting rid of all of those trip hazards, Mark.
Okay, so you'd have a similar formula for grading the condition of footpaths and working out where money needs to be spent in that area, realising that also there are some streets with only one footpath or none at all. So can we talk about that, please?
Sure. Yes, Mark. First off, we have an inspection program, and one of our staff members goes around, often on a gopher, but one of the staff members likes to do it on foot, just checking every section of footpath and where there is a bit of a gap, measuring it and recording it in our system. So we have a map which shows the location of all of these defects that need to be addressed. In terms of the comment you made, Mark, about which footpaths, in some areas there's no footpath on either side of the road. There are some locations where there was a footpath, and perhaps in the 1950s or so, and some asphalt footpaths, and some of them have deteriorated and disappeared. And there are also some main roads that should have a footpath on both sides of the road. So we've got a program to catch up on some of those gaps in the footpath network and progressively replacing those footpaths that disappeared and adding a footpath in streets where there is no footpath, and those main roads, the busy roads, making sure that there's continuous footpaths on both sides of those as well too. So we're doing a little bit of that each year on top of the repair of some of these ones where there are cracks and gaps and trip hazards in the footpath, Mark.
Okay, so that probably leads to another question, John. If members of the public do come across sections of footpath which they consider dangerous, what's the process to tell the council about that, please?
There's a couple of easy ways. One, Mark, a phone call to our reception for the customer services, and the staff there can directly enter that into our customer request system, or people can do it themselves on our web page. It's not on the very first page you get to at the moment because there's a lot of COVID-related information on our homepage at the moment, but there is a tab there that says online tools, and there's a simple data entry form where people can say, this is the address, this is the nature of the hazard or the issue, and that gets fed into the same customer request system as if you call up on the phone. So a couple of easy ways to do that, Mark.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, a question now from Neville. As a community representative on the Horsham Aquatic Centre Advisory Committee, I am constantly asked, when is the pool and gym going to reopen? The pool is required as a community service. I personally need the heated pool for my geriatric workout, especially in this cold weather, and my fellow Easy Workout group members want to start up again. An allowance in the budget should be set aside to subsidise the opening of this much needed exercise venue. When will the Aquatic Centre reopen? Kevin, please.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Neville, for your question. At this stage, on balance, when considering utilisation, affordability and cost, it is not viable for council to reopen the pool. Council has already increased its contract payments to the YMCA due to the impact of COVID-19 to maintain the facility whilst closed. Once all parts of the facility can be reopened, that is when restrictions are further eased, this will enable more users to access the venue and therefore be more viable for the facility to, at that particular point in time, to be reopened.
Thank you, Kevin. Sim, did you want to add anything to that conversation about the pool? It is certainly, we are receiving quite a few questions from people in the community. When is the pool going to open? Realising that around the place some pools are opening. Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, look, as Kevin mentioned, Mark, we absolutely keen to open the pool sooner rather than the later, or for that matter, all the services at that facility, including the gym. And we have been working very closely with the YMCA, who operate the facility under a contract, to see how it can actually be done in a safe manner, but also how we can actually then balance it, with our affordability. So it's just about, and I think we're very close to actually reaching some sort of an agreement on a proposal, which will enable the pool to open.
Yeah.
Not only the pool, the gym as well, as I mentioned.
Yeah, and probably, Kevin, that might lead to another question. So while the pool's been closed, and we're probably might be coming up to 3 months pretty soon, if not already, assume that the pool's been maintained for that time, or nobody's been coming into it?
It is being maintained, so there's obviously pumps and so forth that are in there, and we have got YMCA got some staffing resources to actually ensure that all the maintenance requirements are kept in place and the pool's ticking over and so forth. So it's in hibernation mode, but it just does still take some work just to ensure that it continues to function whilst it's not being used.
Good, thank you. We now have a question from Leo. Who is employing these people who are sanitising all the seats, bins, handrails, etc.? Are they local people? If not, why not local? They never change the rag they use and wipe one item then onto the next half a dozen with the same rag. Sunil.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks for your question, Leo. We had a 4-week cleaning blitz in Horsham, which finished last Friday, and it was undertaken by a contractor who was working for the state government under the Working for Victoria program. The primary objective of the program is to create local employment opportunities for people impacted by COVID-19. And my understanding is that most of the staff the contractor engaged were local. And I know we did have an issue early on in relation to reusing of the rags, but that was addressed very promptly by the contractor once it was picked up. Thanks, Mark.
Okay. And I spoke to a couple of the cleaning team, and one lady was from Japarra and the other lady was from Horsham. And I've got to say they were most appreciative of the opportunity to be out there doing something. And so I'm sure all those people who were doing that work right around the state have all got their own story. And I think it was a good opportunity. As some of the other things which have been put in place to assist people affected by these conditions.
Yeah. If I just also add, Mark, so we have now transitioned, the work which the contractor was doing to our own team. So we have picked up the cleaning program, and very conscious of the need for us to make sure that we try to maintain as much hygiene in public places, and the equipment, playgrounds, the gym equipment and the sort of, not gym equipment, exercise equipment. So that's been picked up. So it's our staff now who will be going around and regularly doing the cleaning of in the public space.
Okay, and that also ties in with we're getting some workers. Is it Working for Victoria? I think that's the name of the scheme.
Yeah, so that's
touch on that.
I mentioned the Working for Victoria program, which is a $500 million program the state government announced early on when COVID-19 struck, and they, again, primarily for with the objective of creating employment opportunities for people who had actually lost their jobs and try to engage people locally. And we have signed up with the state government under that program to take on 28 staff for next 6 months. So that equates to around $1.5 million. It's fully funded by the state government, and we will very soon be starting to advertise those positions. There will be a range of skills, whether it's in waste management area, environmental works, infrastructure works, facility maintenance, that sort of stuff. So those positions, again, the aim would be to try to engage local people who have been impacted in their employment due to the recent issues.
Okay, good. Thank you, Sunil. We now have a question from Kirsty. Why should we bother with sorting recycling into the right bin when you guys put it all in the tip together anyway? John.
Thanks, Mark. I can confirm that Horsham's recycling throughout this year has continued to be sent to and processed by a recycling processor. It's all been recycled. There were a few short months earlier on that some of our neighbouring councils were unable to send their material to be recycled, and that material did end up at Doon landfill, our landfill, for a few months. But more recently, all of those councils have secured new contracts with recycling processors. There are no recyclable materials being received at Doon landfill, so all of our neighbouring councils and us, all the material is being recycled. So I certainly encourage people to continue recycling. It's a very good thing to be doing.
Thank you, John. And I notice in the budget on the larger projects, there's $3.2 million for waste management. Did you want to comment about that at all and what's happening up at the landfill?
Well, primarily, Mark, it relates to the fact that over a period of years, the landfill fills up and we have to build a new hole. When we do that, it needs to be constructed to certain standards to ensure that there's no contamination of the environment, particularly in relation to any potential contamination of groundwater. So it's a costly process to excavate a hole and then put appropriate linings on it. And our current cell is nearing completion. Unfortunately, aided by the fact that we did receive some extra recycled material there for a little while. So we're advancing our plans to get a new cell constructed so we can continue operation of Doon landfill.
Thank you, John. We received a question from Sandra. Why put rates up and garbage up to cover the costs of lost revenue from parking meters that were made free during the worst period of COVID-19? You have got no money from parking anyway due to the fact people were not allowed to go to the supermarkets. Sunil, could you comment on that, please?
Thanks, Mark, and thanks for your question, Sandra. Rates are not being put up to cover the cost of lost parking revenue. Those costs are being met by savings we had to find in our operations across the board. As a matter of fact, we had to find around $2.4 million in next year's budget to cover the drop in our revenue and additional costs, for the new programs we want to implement, to assist the businesses and the community groups. The garbage costs are only being put up by the amount required to deliver the specific services. There are some significant increases happening in the EPA levies, which we pay to the state government. So they will kick in as of 1st of January 2021. And that sort of, in a way, is reflected in the proposed garbage charge increase of around 4.5% next year. So a big major component of the increase is to do with the EPA levy increase.
Okay, so can we just touch on the parking meters? They're still bagged. What's the future of that? Can you comment on that, please?
Yeah, so the parking, the paid parking is been suspended and was suspended way back in end of March, I think, or early April, and that will continue to be the case until the end of this year, until December. So that's council's position, at which time it will be reviewed further to determine if it's appropriate to then commence the paid parking. Yep.
And that also includes some of the fees for the shop owners. They've also been waived and suspended for certain businesses. Is that correct? Can you just touch on that, please? Yep.
So again, in trying to assist the local businesses, so we did suspend charging for any permits for footpath trading, and also that will continue to be the case in the new budget in 2021, and that will also apply to health registration. So there will be waiving off of fees for certain businesses who have been impacted by COVID-19 from those fees. So those charges will be waived off.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, we have a question from Rod. When will Haven Tennis Club's courts be repaired? Also, is there money in this budget for lighting up Haven Tennis Club courts? It's hard to grow our sport when we are held back on both of these items. Kevin, could you answer that question from Rod, please?
Mark, I think John's going to respond to the first component around the tennis club courts repairs.
Sure.
Thanks,
John.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, we're looking at repairs to a number of tennis courts around the region, and this current year's budget is proposing that we'll repair the 3 at Sunnyside and 2 of the courts at Quantong, because they've been assessed as being those in greatest need of repair or more urgent need of repair. Haven is planned to be done the following year, so it's not yet reflected in the budget.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to add anything to that, Kevin?
Mark, just regarding the lighting for the tennis club courts, that's certainly a project we're working closely with Haven on, and we're looking at a future funding application to Sport and Rec Victoria around that particular project, so that we can secure some funding in addition to what funds have been provided locally by the tennis club.
All right, good, thank you. We now have a question from Pat. Who is responsible for the upkeep of the safety rail on the overpass? Some boards are about to drop off. John.
Thanks, Mark. The overpass is on Kalki Road. It's a Vic Roads road, or they're now known as Regional Roads Victoria. I've been in touch with them this afternoon, also had one of my team inspected as well after we got the question. RRV, Regional Roads Victoria, is aware of the status of this, and they are monitoring it to ensure that it doesn't become a safety problem, and they will address it before that occurs.
All right, thank you. And there's another one coming for you. We've got a question from Jeff. What about lights on Wilson Street and Darlett Street intersection? It's a nightmare trying to get through when traffic is banked right back to Fibrace Street, especially for the trucks. They are there for 20 minutes trying to get through. Also, Nannymuck Road is a disgrace with cars, trucks and school buses on it with an uneven surface of humps and hollows. John.
Yes, thanks, Mark. The traffic signals at the corner of Wilson and Darlett have been on our wish list, our advocacy list that we've been pushing to Regional Roads Victoria now for a number of years. This did come up as one of the key items identified in community feedback in our recently completed urban transport plan, and we pass on that feedback to them as well about this. But as I say, it's a Regional Roads Victoria intersection, and we're keen to work with them to try and get some improved access through there during those peak times. In relation to the unevenness of Nannymuck Road, it is a Regional Roads Victoria road, but they are planning to do some upgrade works on that, potentially within the next year. So subject to their budget as well too, Mark, which is like ours going through a review process at present. So they recognise that it is a priority and are planning to do something about it quite soon.
Okay, and as soon as you mentioned Nannymuck Road, often our thoughts go to the Bennett Road intersection. Did you want to comment on that at all, John?
It's another one that's on the top of near the top of our list for advocacy, trying to get some improvement there, Mark, potentially a roundabout or some other treatment to make it safer through there. So we do have a bit of a list of traffic priorities that we share with Regional Roads Victoria and lobby the state government to try and get funding. But I suppose the challenge is, Mark, that there's a lot of competing priorities around the state for those limited funds.
Yeah, okay. And would they give, just a general question, would they give it the road any more priority, seeing it is actually classed as a highway? Does that make any difference for their thinking? The fact there is such a variety, as has been highlighted by Jeff, there is a variety of traffic which uses that road.
Look, yes, they would. The traffic along that section of Nannymuck Road is actually relatively high, but looking at the network of highways around the state, Regional Roads Victoria only deals with arterial roads, the highways and the like, so they have a lot of roads with a lot of traffic on it. That's certainly one of the factors, but it's also safety levels as well too, and crash histories is one of the things that goes into it, and quite understandably, where there's sections of roads which have higher crash histories for whatever reason, that's something that draws the attention for them in terms of their priorities for reconstruction or upgrade works.
Yeah. Can I also just put in a bid for the cyclists? So if you're pedalling your bike down Nanimuck Road, that intersection at Wilson and Darlett is quite hairy for both cyclists and pedestrians. And I think during the transport discussions we had last year, we've seen some drawings about what that intersection could look like to make it safer for vehicles and people.
Yeah, look, it's a consistent thing we're working on these days, Mark, trying to improve intersections to make them bike friendly, pedestrian friendly, as well as car friendly. Roundabouts are great for cars, so we're certainly focusing now more on making it that we can improve the flow of foot, pedal and vehicle traffic.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, John. We've now got a question from Rod. Rod asks, what assets in land do the council own? Can some of it be sold to use for other projects? For example, can the old tip site on Golf Course Road be sold? Sunil.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks for your question, Rod. Council effectively owns two types of vacant land assets. Firstly, the industrial land, in the Enterprise and Burnt Creek estates, and we're also currently developing industrial land in the intermodal freight precinct in Doon. The industrial land is primarily to attract investments in our region, and the proceeds of the sale, I must say, they barely cover the cost of development. The second one is we do also have a few parcels of land which previously have been used for community purposes but are now surplus. We recently developed a process to determine which of these parcels are no longer needed for community use in the future, so that they can be sold off. The tip site on Golf Course Road will be considered as part of this process, and you're absolutely correct. Money collected from the sale of these surplus land assets can be used for other projects, or for that matter, buying other land assets. Thanks, Mark.
So let's wind the clock back a little bit. There was a plan that was thought about at one stage that land in Golf Course Road would make a great BMX track on the recycled land. I'm not sure, have you ever, that crossed your desk, John?
It hasn't come up since last night, Mark, when we had a meeting of our Bicycle Advisory Committee. So it has come up from time to time. It's something we're going to have a bit more of a look at. We need to be sure that there's no potential hazards in what's buried there at the site. And we also need to ensure that any buried material wouldn't be exposed through any activities on that site. But we're prepared to have a look at it and just see what possibilities there might be.
Yeah, I mean, there's not many steep hills around the place, but I reckon that's one of them. Anyway, that's good. Okay, we'll keep moving. We have a question from Claire. The garbage collection is not a problem, but when will all ratepayers get a recycle bin and service? John.
Thanks, Mark. I'm assuming Claire's in our rural areas based on the question, because we certainly don't have recycling across all of our rural areas at present. We were working with a community steering committee until 18 months or so ago, looking at expanding our services. And we were doing that in conjunction with the regional waste group as well too, where we're going to get some more cost-effective contracts for extended services through them. That process was put on hold, so as the state government was preparing a new waste policy. That was released in February of this year, Mark, and you may recall the government announced that it was going to have a 4-bin policy, where there'd be a separate bin for regular waste, one for most of our recyclables, and then 2 new bins, one for glass and one for organics. So we're working again with the waste group to develop up our plans on how we'll roll those out. And I expect there'll be some further consultation about exactly how we'll do that and when we'll do it as well, Mark, early in the new financial year. There's a fair bit of cost involved in introducing the new services, and fortunately the government policy has announced some funding for councils to assist that. We're just trying to firm up the details of when that funding will become available so that we can get the funding at the right time to introduce those services. So very keen to get an expansion of recycling services into our rural areas, but also those 2 new services as well.
And one of the questions that spring to mind is having all those extra bins. So do you foresee that people will have the opportunity to have a say in the size of bin they receive, like they do now?
Certainly, Mark, and often people might say that, well, a 240 litre bin for recycling is too heavy. Can I have a smaller bin? We'll be able to accommodate that. But it's going to be part of the consultation, exactly how we do it. And that'll come up in the next few months.
Yeah, and you mentioned the waste group. So can you just paint a quick picture about the waste group? Who's part of that, please?
Sure, Mark. The Grampian Central West Waste and Resource Recovery Group, quite a mouthful of a name, includes 12 councils from the outskirts of Melbourne. Moorabool, I think, is at the eastern end of that group, through Melton, Ballarat, Pyrenees, Northern Grampians, Horsham, and through to the South Australian border. So it's a lot of efficiencies and better, more effective outputs by working with our neighbouring councils in that sort of a partnership.
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, we've got a couple more on the page, and then we've got some come through on the chat, so we'll pick up them shortly. We have a question from Brian. This budget contains funds to complete works on the Wesley Performing Arts Centre, but in May 2019, the council only committed to providing in-kind management expertise. So why has this item been added to the budget? Kevin, please, can you answer that?
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Brian, for your question. The Wesley Performing Arts project is being delivered by council. Funds for the project are provided by the Wesley Committee, so that the Wesley Committee is funding the project. It's being delivered by council. Council is providing in-kind funds for project management expertise, and that's to a value of $60,000. So certainly nothing has changed as far as the council resolution in relation to carrying out the works on Wesley as per and the requirements around safety and so forth to open the facility, and the funds being provided for these works are funds provided by the Wesley Committee.
And so on Wesley, the building's been closed for a little while now, and can you give us a rough idea that when the building might be open again, do you think?
Well, Mark, I'd be saying sort of that June period next year. I'd optimistically, hopefully it might be a bit earlier, but there's a few steps to go. We've got to get all the assessments done of the building and then get some designs developed up and then go to market for the works that are required. And obviously at that particular point we'll know what the costs are. So there's a few steps in the process, and obviously it's been, some of the planning has been held up with the COVID situation as well. So I'm certainly hoping that, you know, by the next financial year, July 1, we'd have that facility reactivated, subject to having the funds to do the works required.
Yeah. Okay, good, thank you. We now have a question from Raylene. Are there any funds earmarked for the public toilets in the Horsham CBD? John.
Thanks, Mark. The only such proposal is for some new toilet facilities in the skate park area, which is on the edge of the CBD, Mark, behind the plaza area off Park Drive. So arguably perhaps not quite in the CBD area, but close to it. And the exact details of that's going to be subject to some planning of how the overall area, that little precinct, should be best used. So that will occur this financial year. About $160,000 allocated for those toilets, Mark.
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, we've now got some questions which have been sent in since we started. So the first question, I'll go to the top of the page in front of me. Di asks, where can we find the finer details of the packages budgeted to recover from COVID that have been attributed to the increase in the rates? Sunil, did you want to have a crack at answering that, or was that Graeme?
Graeme probably.
Perhaps Graeme, would you like to answer that question from Di, please?
Yeah, certainly. In terms of the detail around them, so the detail at a very high level was reported in the report that went to council, and there was an attachment to that which actually just expanded on some of those programs. And Kevin's economic development team are now have a group working together to sort of put all the detail around each of those programs. Obviously, we can't commence any of them until the the draft budget is adopted. So the intention is that economic development team will be working together with the likes of Business Horsham and other local organisations to actually work through the detail of those programs. Some will be, they're a mix of grant programs and promotional things, and so the detail is being worked on now.
Okay, good, thank you. Now I'm just doing this live, so I'm looking at the next one. That's also from Di. So the draft states that the expenditure cuts were made in February, which is pre-COVID. Surely these need to be re-investigated and the details released to the public.
Yeah, so I can answer that, Mark. In terms of obviously the budget document itself is a large document, and the council budget is a large undertaking, well over $50 million. So there's lots of unders and lots of things going up and going down. In terms of the specific items that had been cut in that earlier versions of the budget, they were reported in the open council meeting when the draft budget was attached. So I'd sort of refer Di back to that report where it did actually spell out some of the cuts that were made and some of the also extra costs that we had as well that were picked up in that earlier, or in the overall budget. But it is difficult to put everything into the one final document.
Okay, good, thank you. I have a question about the community grants, and I was going to mention that tonight that this year $381,000 has been allocated to community grants to help a variety of groups and organisations. So the question which has been received from Di, re the community grants, some events on the list have already been cancelled. What will happen to the community grants approved for events if they've been cancelled? So that might be you again, Graeme, I think.
Yeah, and I can again point back to the report that went up to council, which actually in that report, we said that for event funding, should the event be cancelled for 2021, then the grant allocation will be withdrawn and the organisation will be encouraged to apply for it in the next round for the next year. Reason for that is obviously we don't know whether the event is going to be rescheduled or not. Certainly we've had one contact us already, and our grants team have responded to them, and we're sort of keeping obviously a list of those, and we'll make sure that they're well informed and don't miss out on the next round of events, of the next round of the grants. In terms of other programs, if there's a program that might be impacted, we've said again back in that report that went to council that we would in fact carry those forward, because obviously they can still be delivered in a different time frame, whereas an event may or may not occur.
Yep. Okay, that's good, thank you. And also in the business and community support package, there'll be some grants available, proposed to have some grants available there as well?
Yes, there are.
Yeah, okay, thank you. All right, so they're all the questions we've got in front of me. We've gone through the page of questions. The time is 6:29. So, Sunil, is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
No, I think we've covered pretty much all the questions we had. But look, I mean, this is an ongoing dialogue, you know. So and I know you will touch on the the process for the submissions and the closing date. So clearly, if people have other questions or queries, by all means, send us through, email them to us or give us a ring, and yeah, be very happy to have a chat. Yeah, and Rob asked me to also mention that we have an online forum which is now open, which is on council's website. And so once again, there's an opportunity there to engage. Obviously, a little bit different to previous years when we're out and about a little bit more with the budget. But certainly, we're trying some new ways to get people engaged. And so I'd encourage people to check out council's online forum.
on the hrcc.vic.gov.au website. So thank you very much for tuning in tonight. Graeme's put his hand up.
Yeah, just one other thing, Mark. We will be having a drop-in location somewhere in the CBD, which we're still working on getting that location finalised. Obviously, we need to work through COVID-19 restrictions in terms of doing that, but the intention was to have a place where people can drop in at their leisure over a period of, you know, three days or so, so that down in the CBD where when they come in for other business, and they can come and see us and talk to an officer or perhaps councillors as well.
Yeah,
but we'll announce some more detail on that once we know exactly where it's going to be.
Yeah, sure. And certainly it's very encouraging to see a few more shops opening now in the CBD. It was quite busy yesterday in town, which is very encouraging for all concerned. So we'll leave it there, folks. Thank you very much to the people for listening and joining in with us tonight. Encourage you to be part of the budget process. And so we'll say good night and thank you very much.